I am your host, Emily Lawrence, and I'm here with my co-host, Jen Knox, and we have a special guest today, Christy Weirbach. Christy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Super excited to have you. For those who don't know Christy, she's a director of workforce advisory here at SN and kind of our guru on all things HR, has a PhD in organizational management with a focus in HR. So definitely an awesome resource to have kind of at our fingertips and for our clients as well. So Christy, we're going to jump right in because it's a quick episode. But really for some of our listeners that may be small to mid-sized companies and not have a full HR department or a strategy around people, what's one of those things that they can be thoughtful of around talent to really get the most out of their team?
Yeah, the one suggestion I would have is stop treating it as a one size fits all and try to be more specific with how you target either people you're looking to add to your team or the people that you want to keep on your team, and better understand, what are they looking for in their experience in your organization?
Yeah, I feel like that experience they're looking for, right, is so tied to one, where they see themselves now, and then potentially like where they want to take their career in the future, right? They have to know that they have a spot on your team or a path that's open to them. I know, Emily, you experienced that at some other companies. It's like it's so rewarding and fulfilling to know where you may go in the future.
Yeah, I think, I've worked at like Fortune 1 corporate, everything is baked in, right? All of your career path is baked in, your expectations are baked in, you have set, schedule for everything. And one of the things, Christy, that you talk about is that alignment, setting those expectations and everyone being really clear about purpose, about what's expected of them, their role in the company. And I definitely find that as a helpful tool.
Yeah, I've boiled it down to 3 words currently. Maybe this will change as we move forward, but clarity. People just want to know, like you said, Emily, what's expected of them and what is the role I'm supposed to perform and how can I be successful at it? And then potential. What can I continue to learn and grow in your organization, both personally and professionally? And then lastly, what's the impact that I'm going to have? So either for my clients in the community, the work that I'm doing that's part of a larger objective. So I think those 3 things, clarity, potential, and impact. And if we can connect those pieces for each person in our organization and get that aligned, I think we're far better than maybe some of our competitors.
Yeah, I loved in your recent webinar that you hosted, those were the 3 words that really stuck out to me as like just being really key pieces to talk about and to sort of categorize as the why behind creating a structure and creating that purpose.
Yeah, and if you think back to my original comment, it's not going to be the same for every person. So think about the generation that somebody might sit in or is part of, that could be defined differently. And it's our job to understand and peel that back so then we can align expectations all around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, like as a tangible takeaway, I know we say, right, it can't be a one size fits all. So what do you suggest firms do when they're thinking about that growth of their employees or development of their employees?
Ask them.
Yeah.
See what they are most interested in, right? And then also see if that the role that they're in aligns and provides the opportunity to be able to help them move further down that path. And if not, well, then what lever can we adjust to hopefully bring that closer to alignment?
So how do you assess that? How do you get those opinions?
Well, you talk to people. Yeah, if supervisors are meeting regularly, hopefully they are. If not, maybe a survey. So that way it could be anonymous or specific. But yeah, you have to talk to people and you have to make time for them and not just focus on discussing the work and the tasks that are in front of you today, but rather just have some focused time. And it doesn't have to be long. It could just be 10 or 15 minutes, but asking some very specific questions. What are you looking for? Where do you want to continue to grow your skills or increase your knowledge or develop more experience? So it could be a variety of projects. It could be something more challenging. I mean, possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially for like engineers and architects, it's like oftentimes they feel like there's this set path they feel like they have to take from that technical role to maybe a senior engineer, then to project management. And that it's not always for everyone, right? That project management or even people management, that's not always something that individuals are interested in. They may really love like their technical expertise and, you know, giving that value to projects. That's something I think that we kind of get stuck in, is just thinking there's this one way up.
Right. No, and learning can happen both vertically and horizontally. And you're exactly right, Jen. Some people just don't want to have to handle the people side of it. They don't want to lead, they don't want to manage. And it's okay, because we need our technical rock stars as well. And there can be a path where they continue to refine their skills and just accumulate more experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that in your podcast or in your webinar as well, when you were talking about some people they aren't looking to climb the ladder at the company, but there is such a broad way to where they can keep developing and still feel like they're developing in their career just with their technical skills.
Right.
Now, Christy, when you have an individual like that, or are thinking about these different ways of development, either vertically or jumping over horizontally, how does that kind of affect compensation, or how employees are compensated for those multiple roles they're maybe playing? I feel like that can be tough for leaders in an organization to figure out a balance there.
Yeah, exactly that. Thinking about, okay, how much time are they spending either doing the technical part of their role, the business development, the project management, the leadership, and so forth. And so you might have to apply some percentages to the data that you're comparing to. So if you're going out to look at industry medians or midpoints, applying potentially a blend, right? You might have to do a prorated calculation to determine what really should the compensation be for the role that that person is performing, because sometimes it's not just one role, it is multiple roles like you had shared. And so, yeah, that sometimes you have to apply a little bit of an art. As much as we want a science to it, we can try to get it pretty close, but you might have to put a little bit of a qualitative analysis on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that compensation, right? So one of the things that you talk a lot about is when you're going down into your levels, you're leveling, and then you're doing the compensation based on the levels and titles of positions. So one of the things that I think I've experienced at other companies is that people are giving out titles sort of freely. There isn't an alignment around title specific language or what that looks like. So they like someone, they want to keep them at the company. So they negotiate a title that is somewhat subjective. So how does that affect things as far as compensation, and also as far as accountability and clarity on where you can go within the company? So that career pathing piece.
Yeah, I have found that companies do a disservice to individuals when they artificially inflate a title. So in order to maybe retain them, they'll say, oh, well, I'll call you a senior XYZ. And so then when that person steps out and maybe looks at going somewhere else, now they think that they probably deserve a role that's higher than maybe what their skills bring to the table. And so it is really important that, the title can be like lipstick, right? It can be interchangeable and so forth, but you really have to look at the role, and that's what you want to compare to when you're going out and looking at the data to make sure that the responsibilities are aligned, the skills needed, the knowledge that's accumulated and so forth, those years of experience, are they similar, are they different? And that all plays into how we define the pay ranges for each role, because it can quickly get imbalanced, especially if we allow our hiring managers to make all the decisions surrounding compensation, and we don't have a framework in place to help them guide through those conversations when they're looking to hire or promote someone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if we can pivot a little bit and focus on that compensation piece. And maybe, Christy, I'd ask you, are there some trends out there that are changing and shifting around compensation, especially around maybe demographics and how different generations may view like total compensation and where they really place value on one portion or the other?
Yeah, so compensation is larger than just the base salary. Sometimes people want to connect it just to the base salary, but if you think about incentives, bonuses, overtime, all of the different benefits and the value of PTO and so forth that you provide, it is a total package. And so, one, educating employees so they truly understand what's all included in that package. So if they are doing an external comparison, it's apples to apples rather than trying to compare an apple to an orange. But yeah, you're right, Jen. The different generations are at different points in their lives or different seasons of their lives. And so what they're motivated by or most interested in could be different from one age group to another. So think about those who might be within the 10-year window of retirement. They might largely be interested on how much is my company going to put into my retirement plan, or what insurance do I need to have in place, maybe a more fruitful plan that will cover some of those more expensive prescriptions or increasing medical procedures and tests and so forth. And then somebody younger might be just thinking about how am I going to afford to help put my parents in an assisted facility? How am I going to pay off my college tuition? How am I going to pay to raise a family? So understanding the needs of our people and the seasons of their life is so important, because then are we doing a good enough job with pulling that package together in a meaningful way for them? And maybe it doesn't have to look the same from one generation to the other, right? So sometimes the art is just in how we communicate and where we place emphasis on the value that the organization is providing for them.
Interesting. I find that so like tough to think about is like, can you, when you're trying to meet these needs of various generations, it's like, how far can you go of tailoring it?
Mm-hmm.
Versus, to your point, is it just maybe communicating the same package in a little bit different of a way?
Right. Yeah. And it could vary from one company to another.
Oh, yeah.
So it is really an art.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, and I think, you know, we've talked about this as a company on separate webinars, but one of the main things that younger people are looking for is that compensation. Absolutely. Like, can I afford to pay my rent and all of my bills? Like, how am I actually surviving here? Especially, you know, during COVID was a huge, I think, eye-opener for people entering into the workforce. That was huge. People were cutting salaries. There was not enough work. So I think that was a major shift as well in mindset. So younger people, of course, we're looking at compensation and, you know, who's going to pay us the most, because anything can happen. There's an uncertainty, I think, that created. But then also, I think we've really talked about a large percentage of people really just want that opportunity to develop and want companies to invest in their development. And when you look at the number, you know, the number, the money that you're going to spend investing in someone's development, and then the money that you're going to invest in replacing them when they leave. And I think the average for marketing people in AEC is 2.8 years within the first year.
Yeah, that's tough. And to your point, Emily, like well, I think the other thing you gotta like keep in mind is the recruitment cost it took to get them there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've already, that's a sunk cost already. If you lose them, you've got to go back out and do that again. So how do you keep them at your company longer and keep your company sticky to them, we always say. And I think it is that development and knowing that there's a future for them and they can grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and part of the equation that, you know, isn't really tangible is just the additional pressure on the team, who either has to keep training individuals and or assuming some of the tasks while the individuals are getting brought up to speed. And then you also, see a decrease in efficiency as well as somebody is being brought up to speed. So there's so many other things at play that if we would have just taken a little bit more time and energy on the front side and invested a little bit more effort, we could have held on to them and not had that ripple effect, affect us further out. And just think about it. You lose one or two people. Think about some companies that are losing more than that, and just all of the costs and variables surrounding that. It's significant.
Yeah, and especially I feel that is you can see that much more clearly in construction sometimes, especially with the skilled trades, right?
Mm-hmm.
You bring a laborer on and you invest in some training, but not enough. It creates a safety concern, productivity decreases how much that crew can get done in a day. But if you invest just a little bit more, right, enough that they can do their job safely and efficiently, they're much more likely to stay. You'll get more out of them. And the whole cohesion of the team, to your point, Christy, is so much better.
Yeah.
In that same light, I guess, when we're thinking about development and retaining people, performance improvement, I think, is such a key part of that, is getting that feedback on how you're doing, what the expectations are, kind of where you need to maybe invest or change your approach to things. So how does performance improvement really tie into all of this?
Well, it all starts with, do we really provide a way for employees to know what's expected of them? Commonly, when I ask companies, how are your job descriptions? Do you have them? And are they up to date? And a lot of times, no, it's just not something that's at the top of the priority list. And over time, jobs evolve and change. And so making sure employees know, what do I need to do to be successful? What are the skills that I need that'll help me be successful? And so if we position them to be successful, now if there is a gap in performance, we can point back to the areas specifically and give examples of, hey, these are the things that you can do to elevate your performance in these 1, 2, or 3 areas. And so having more specific conversations with, examples allows employees then to connect the task or the thing that they need to do to be able to get to a better place. And so I long held that job descriptions are a critical piece that organizations need. I know there's argument that they're not needed, but I really believe they are, because we have to be at peace knowing that we did everything we could to help our people be successful. One, by having that clarity and giving them the opportunity to know what's expected of them. What did they sign up for? But then did we give them all the resources and tools? Did we make the investments in the technology and or that learning and growth to help them continue to refine their skills and so forth? So yeah, I always start with the question, have I as a supervisor or organization done enough to help position that person to be successful and perform to where I would expect them to be?
Well, and I find that really an interesting point too, because I think there's such a disparity between what leadership views as development programs and the way that employees view their opportunities to develop at companies. So I was just looking up some surveys recently, and there was a survey that said, it was like 94% of, I think it was architecture, it was anywhere from 80 to 94% was a couple of the surveys I had looked at, that they had surveyed them asking if they felt like they had development and career opportunities for employees and provided that to their employees. And 80 to 94% of them said yes, that they did. They felt like they had that. And then another survey that came in and actually worded it, do you have a formal development program in place? Do you have formal career pathing opportunities? And it dropped to, I think, 66%. And then another survey that actually went out to employees and said, do you feel like your company's, the company you work for, do you have proper career opportunities and learning development opportunities? And I think it was 80 some percent said no, they could be doing more. So I think there's a huge disparity. It's like, do you have a formal one in place? Is that something you recommend would be critical for employees to feel that way?
You need a framework, but I don't know that I would use the word formal. I think intentional. So if we know that there's a skill gap, let's say we have the job description and there's somebody falling short and there's a gap we have to fill and it's highly urgent. Well, then helping the supervisor or leader to identify opportunities to develop that skill. It may not be a college course, it may not be a class or a seminar, but rather maybe that person job shadowing, going along and having an experience, and then debriefing from that experience to talk about, okay, what are the things that we saw, observed, what are the recommendations, etc. So helping supervisors to identify more specifically how they can connect talent gaps or talent desires, those skills that they want to increase. What can we specifically do day in and day out, instead of looking up and saying, oh my gosh, I should have brought that person along with me, it would have been a great learning opportunity, right? Being on the front side, I think, would be a lot better. So I go back to intentional is what I think we need to be better at.
I love that. I think that sort of fits if you're intentional about developing your employees and they recognize that intention and they feel like that's something that they can discuss openly.
Yeah, that's like, even like Emily and I do this, is like identify maybe some meetings that our leaders are having in the next week or so that we can sit in on, just to start to, hear the level of the conversation at that point and how they're engaging with clients and whatnot. So I think that's an awesome way. To your point, Christy, it's not a formal thing we have, but it's just this intentional way that we want to make sure you're getting these touches of development throughout your week or throughout your month.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd like to highlight, so those organizations like Stan Boness, where we are almost 100% remote, historically along the way, when I was physically in an office, I had people tell me, Christy, I just learned so much by overhearing your conversations and eavesdropping. Well, that doesn't happen now. And so I, as a leader, have to be even more intentional. And I'll admit, I don't know that I always do the best at it, right? Because you're just in the throes of your day and meeting to meeting to meeting. So that's the advice I would give to the audience, is that thinking about the change in the workplace dynamic a couple of years ago till today, and just trying to be more intentional with how we can share those experiences and knowledge with the younger generations or people who are stepping into new roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it goes back to that word intentional.
Yeah.
And also you brought up something too, was like creating a culture. Like if you're aligned and everyone's sort of aligned on culture. Because I do think part of that is a cultural thing. Because I think a lot of times as a younger employee, you do have to raise your hand, especially in a virtual environment. You do have to raise your hand and say, I'd like to be involved in this. I'd like to pursue this opportunity, or, do this class, or I would like to attend your meeting. Mm-hmm. And so that's that feeling comfortable as well. Like leadership needs, I think that is a responsibility as far as culture goes, is to allow younger employees to feel free to raise their hand and say, hey, and not feel like they're going to get shut down, or like, oh, there are times where it's like a not yet, but
yeah. At least though, they hopefully they're creating a culture that they feel like they can raise their hand, right? It's a safe space. You can take a risk and be like, hey, that's something I might be interested in. Can I sit in? And to your point, it could be a no, not right now. Or this is not the best client to sit in on, but 2 weeks from now, I have another great one you could sit on. So,
right.
Yeah, it's that cultural thing.
Yeah, and I think each person has to own their own learning journey, but a supervisor or leader has a responsibility to help that person bring it to life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like be their champion a little bit, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
a flower. It's like a flower. Help them bloom.
Yes, help them bloom. Well, and that's something that I think people at smaller companies, because I think in terms of obviously marketing, you might be the only marketing person sitting at the company. So it's sort of, who do you get development from? Like, how do you develop in your role when you have no one sitting there that's above you on your team, right? I know a lot of people that are marketers and they're the only ones on their team. And I think, one of the things that I always recommend when I'm talking to people that maybe don't have, honestly, anybody, but people that don't have a lot of peer development even, is seeking out mentorship and joining organizations and having the company support you in joining those types of organizations so you can bring back that knowledge, so you can develop, so you can do that. Seek out mentors that are different than you, that are similar to you. Like, just find people that you connect with, that you like what they do. And that's how you can also kind of grab onto your own career development. I've had to do that in positions I've had in the past.
Well, and one of the biggest places is joining a networking association. So for me, like the Society of Human Resource Management, going to industry specific conferences and sitting with different people at the lunch table, the breakfast table, and just strike up conversation. Or sitting in sessions, you'll hear other experiences, and that helps with learning and building on the knowledge that you have to date. So yeah, try and find every opportunity to learn something new as often as you can. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as leaders, right, especially in this industry, if you're a leader of a company, if you're being exposed to all the different opportunities for that development, like to all the different organizations, and you can provide that information to the younger employees because they don't know what they don't know, right? And there could be a really good opportunity for them. So I think as leaders, that's also something that you can provide to them. Is I may not be a marketing person, but I do know about, SMPS is one of the large.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the best organization for marketing professionals. I serve on the Colorado Communications Committee, so look out for our newsletters and blogs. But yeah, I mean, that's how I've sort of learned a lot of my skills in my career, is just joining organizations, finding mentors. And it's like, I'm the first one to be like, have you heard about this organization? Or can I connect you to this person? And I think even if you can't career path someone at the company necessarily, it's like you were talking about, it's those other ways to provide opportunities for development.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Christy, before we wrap up, so Jen and I had a dying question for you that we wanted to get to. And it has to do with the compensation, sort of around that. But you talk about these outliers that sometimes when you're going through the process of identifying that architecture and then identifying the levels and the compensation and that alignment of that, I think you mentioned that there's outliers. And so we were curious, is there anything, any type of outlier or experience that you've had to kind of handle that stands out in your many years of experience?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that outliers come to be with compensation. One is that the demand coming out of college of our students is higher than it was many years ago. And that's putting wage compression on the people that have been in the craft for 10, 15, 20 years. So that can be just difficult conversation, right? Trying to navigate through that wage compression. Sometimes you have somebody who completely goes out of the pay range because they're technically awesome, but they're not accumulating any more responsibilities. And so that too can create an imbalance with our pay ranges and so forth. So yeah, there's times where we've identified that somebody has that glorified title, right?
Yeah.
Prematurely promoted to project manager or something like that. And so then when we go through the exercise of trying to align the roles with the data and creating good pay range framework, we sometimes have to have those difficult conversations. So yeah, it happens. It's normal, but we have experience to help people through it.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, anyone that works with you, Christy, I know they have a great resource in you. I've seen you kind of navigate clients around some difficult stuff. So it's definitely awesome to have you on the show. And I'm sure Emily will have her back at some point, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. This has been fun, ladies.
It was great. And I love how you kind of started it all off with, it's not one size fits all. We need to sit down, have those key conversations with our employees, see where they want to take their careers and help them kind of navigate that and get there. So yeah, great conversation, and thank you so much.
Thank you.